Welcome back to Munchausen's Proxy. And when last we left Syfy's The Ark, we had two separate storylines get resolved, sort of. The first was everybody hallucinating, and the second was Lieutenant Garnett getting arrested for murder. Now, the murder is going to have more fallout in episode 5 because the way it was resolved was top secret, and so Strickland, the head of security, is not going to discuss it. However, Lieutenant Asshole goes looking deeper, and because of last week's medical emergency, the doc is pretty much out on her feet and heavily using stimulants to keep herself awake. Well, Lieutenant Asshole makes nice and offers to let her get some sleep. Well, she goes back to wherever it is she's quartered, and he stays with her computers and breaks into her confidential medical records and finds out Lieutenant Garnett is a clone. Clones being illegal, because clones, especially after the first generation, tend to go a little bonkers and start killing people. Like Lieutenant Garnett's doppelganger in the video from last week. Well, Lieutenant Asshole first decides he's going to blackmail her into ceding him leadership. And when she refuses to step down, he decides that he's so popular and so persuasive that he's going to convince the Leadership Council to vote for him, which of course made me think of the Kelsey Grammer movie from the 90s, Down Periscope, where the asshole executive officer decides Kelsey Grammer's character stepped out of line and the crew should vote him in as captain, which goes about as well as this episode of The Ark does. And damn if he isn't shocked when instead of voting her out, they vote her acting captain, which she pretty much was anyway. So that's how that winds up going. And of course, it doesn't make Lieutenant Asshole happy, even after Lieutenant Garnett graciously decides to make him her second in command. With that done, Garnett urges the engineer, Ava, to try and get the ship closer to light speed, because at the rate they are going currently, the velocity will take them 10 years to get to Proxima, which is where they're going. So back in engineering, Ava begins to slowly increase the engines, and while she's gone and winds up talking to Strickland, a meltdown begins. There's a leak in the xenon that they use to power the engines. Ava, while talking to Strickland, is accused of being the killer because Kat, the therapist, hinted to him that she thought that she was pissed that Jasper Dades killed her boyfriend in the emergency in the first episode. So he's talking to her in the closet they had Dades locked in, and she basically pushes him in and locks the closet so that he can't get out, and then vents the air until he is almost passed out, opening it and saying, "That's how I would have killed him, and nobody would have known the difference." And then she basically says she wouldn't be stupid enough to flush the weapon down the water system that she herself would have to fix. And needless to say, he's convinced. Meanwhile, the ship is still melting down, only nobody knows it because the dude who is in engineering is dead from radiation poisoning. Strickland goes back to his office and for some reason just now gets around to investigating where the video came from that sort of pointed him in the direction of Garnett, and figures it out in about 3 seconds that it was coming from Annoying Girl's tablet, but she was on the bridge at the time. So to smoke out who did it, he has her arrested publicly, gets her alone and explains why he did it, and she suddenly realizes the boy she's been making moon eyes at had her tablet at the time. So after a very short chase, Trent, the kid who had her tablet, is arrested. And it's about that time that they figure out the ship is melting down. And they're having to evacuate sections of the ship as the radiation creeps forward from engineering. What they need is to get somebody into engineering and shut down the reactor. Now, what I want to know is, why exactly does a spaceship that runs on something that is radioactive not have radiation suits? They have the space suits that cover stellar radiation, but they don't have anything that handles the type of radiation that is on the bloody ship. But that's neither here nor there. Garnett calls for volunteers among the entire crew, and when nobody volunteers, she decides she's going to volunteer. Well, Lieutenant Asshole gets a light bulb popping up over his head, and his eyes go bright, and he's like, "Give me 10 minutes." And he rushes out of the room that they're having a meeting in. And he goes and he talks to Trent in the closet they have him locked in. And he volunteers to be the sacrificial lamb. But before he does so, he tells Lieutenant Asshole something. They don't show you at the time what it was. So they deck him out in a spacesuit, which will give him some protection, but it won't allow him to get in there and get out and survive. And so he runs into the radiated areas and gets to the engineering, shuts it down, saves the ship. When Garnett asks him what Trent told him to make him trust him, he basically tells her that Trent said he was doing it for Annoying Girl, which is going to f*** up Annoying Girl's head completely, which he probably did not think of and wouldn't think of because he is Lieutenant Asshole. So the closing scene is Lieutenant Asshole sneaking off to what looks like a cargo hold, looking furtive as hell, finds a secret section that Trent told him about, and he finds William Trust and a female in hibernation pods. Trust being the founder of the ARC program, meant to save humanity and get everybody off Earth before it becomes a barren, uninhabitable hellhole. And that's how they end the show. Now, this episode was even better than last, so we're continuing the good trajectory that the show has been on pretty much from episode 1, which was not that great. This episode, basically the only problem I had with the entire episode is the whole suit thing. Why were there no heavy radiation suits that any place that has radiation-powered engines should have? If they had the radiation suit, nobody would have had to sacrifice themselves. And so, therefore, it's a lazy plot device. And unfortunately, that's all too common in the writing out of Hollywood these days, where lazy contrivances are used in the place of better crafted stories. Annoying Girl also continued her downward trajectory from peak annoyance in the first couple of episodes. She actually wasn't that bad this episode. I don't know if people at NBC Universal saw the first couple episodes and got back to the showrunners of this show and were like, hey, get a hold of her and tone her the hell down. because she is going to drive people away in droves. When she's not being a spastic twit, she's actually a pretty good character. And last episode probably gave a hint as to why she is the way she is, because her mother was a helicopter parent. Lieutenant Garnett, Strickland, Bryce are all really good characters. Bryce is pretty much invisible in this episode. Trent, I'm kind of surprised they sacrificed, because he seemed to be going on a character building journey, as he decided to, or seemed to decide last episode, to get out from underneath the thumb of his mentor who died in the accident on the ship in the first episode. And they seem to be some part of some conspiracy or secret society that is more supportive of William Trust than the rest of humanity. They sort of have been hinting that William Trust came up with the idea of the ARC program and then lost his marbles and was kicked aside. And so it's interesting to see that they killed him, but had him pass the torch to Lieutenant Asshole, who was a William Trust groupie, apparently. He thinks the man's a genius. And he was about gaga-eyed when he saw William Trust in the hibernation pod at the end of this episode. So the show's getting better, and the characters are getting better, except for Lieutenant Asshole, but I think he's supposed to be Lieutenant Garnett's foil for the show. And the story is definitely getting interesting, and I think it's going to be worth watching the rest of the season to see where it goes. I think I'll leave that there. If you like what I do here, please hit the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel. Make sure the bell icon is clicked on so you're notified when new videos get uploaded. And I will see you in the next video. Tschüss.